Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima and welcome back to the Biweekly Playdate, where we check out the games that have come out for the Playdate in the last 2 weeks. However, things are changing up a little bit in this episode. There will be no homebrew at the end of this one, and I do apologise for that. Some technical issues caused that actually, and I'll go on about them at the end of the video. But for now, let's just jump into the games themselves. The first game this fortnight is something that just completely caught me by surprise, especially if you're judging by the actual logo of the game that I try and put up before I actually launch the games here. DemonQuest 85 is a game about summoning demons. You do this by gathering 3 of your friends together, a sort of tribute or a sacrifice, I can't remember exactly what they call it, a bit of music to help lure the demon in, and then you just try and summon them through this book. But it adds a few things on top of that. There's this little bit of an investigative element where you have to decide who of your 3 friends are the best, what music you need to play, what sacrifice you need to offer up. And then on top of that, once you actually start speaking to the demon, there's this whole backstory going on about this war in hell with the demons being at each other's throats all the time. And it just creates this really neat little atmosphere where you're trying to influence this while at the same time talking to all of these friends, figuring out what makes them tick. And the real world changes alongside them too. Like they have their own wants and needs, and that's how you figure out who needs to go with the demon. You decide who gets like what benefit from the demon, because they can usually do you a favor if they get summoned. And it just makes this really interesting little concept. The only thing that I was kind of annoyed by is that it can be hard sometimes trying to figure out what characters need to go with what demon. The game does admittedly give you a fair few bits of advice. Like, it'll give you very specific lines of dialogue saying, hey, I'm probably meant to be here, or hey, I'm probably not meant to be here, in a fair few more words than that. But sometimes it can just be a bit hard thinking, right, bring this person along, this person along, and this person along. But outside of that, it's just a really clever idea. I'm enjoying what I'm playing of it, and I'm going to play some more of it later, when I figure out the technical issues I've been having. That's for later in the video. Honestly, this would probably be the highlight of the fortnight if it wasn't for another game that's coming on just a little bit later. Our second game is Omaze. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that. Omaze? But it is a very simple puzzle game where you control this little ball around these circles in order to do these simple puzzles. However, there's a little bit of playing around with them. They have a lot of different elements going on. There's a fair few little control things that you need to figure out along the way. And even got boss fights towards the end, which I find to be surprising, especially in a sort of puzzle game like this one. And it's really exactly what it looks like on the tin. There's very little hidden underneath the surface. It gives you a very good idea of what you need to do. It's not punishing in the slightest. And honestly, the few puzzles I had the time to play for this gave me a fair amount of enjoyment. It's very simple. There's very little in the way of actual challenge once you figure out what you need to do. But it's still enjoyable enough, nonetheless, to see how they play around with these puzzles, how they give you these little different ways to solve them. The only real problem I had with it is that actually controlling the character is done entirely with the crank. And well, except for the puzzles where you're not required to do that, and then at that point it becomes a button timing and memorization exercise, but that's not bad either. But it creates this neat, it still creates this little problem where it can be kind of hard to figure out what direction you need to go with the crank, and I somehow managed to bugger it up almost every single time I needed to worry about what direction I was going with the crank. But otherwise, it's not that bad. Also, it's only got like 4 sets of levels, so you can probably finish the game in something like half an hour, which is one of the shortest games on this list, if you don't count the arcade ones, which are meant to be replayed, but there you go. Our third game this fortnight is Meteor, which is basically just asteroids, but instead of having a cannon on the front of your ship, the front of your ship is the cannon. So you'll be spending your time ramming into these asteroids in order to split them apart. And I'm just going to warn you right off the bat here, I'm not very good at this game. Because the entirety of the game's controls, well, most of them anyway, are the crank. So you use the crank to point yourself in the direction that you want to go in. And then you've got like a button that will accelerate you forward and another button that will let you throw out the smart bomb. However, I will say right off the bat that I do not like this control scheme. Because not only do you have to worry about the crank, you also have to worry about the fact that you never stop moving. You are always carrying some level of forward momentum no matter what you're doing. And it makes the game annoyingly hard to control and be precise with. Especially with this game and how the collision mask on the ship itself works. You'll hit something that you swear you didn't even touch, while at the same time going straight past something that you've clearly gone over the top of. And it can get really frustrating to deal with, especially since in this game you need to start from level 1, I should say, which is just very low intensity before the good stuff even starts happening. And I admit to being just kind of disappointed in it, because it can just be really easy to have a good run getting wrecked by something that doesn't feel like your fault. And yeah, I just don't end up liking this one. It just kind of feels like a gimmick more than anything else, using the crank to control this more than anything, and I don't like it. I don't really like it. Can't get it to gel with me at all on this one.
Level 4. Game over. Game over.
And here it is, the highlight of the fortnight, Zipper by Bennett Foddy. And this one is really interesting. So for those of you who don't know Bennett Foddy, you bloody should. He's the guy who made Quap, Gerp, Getting Over It, Ape Out, although he was part of a tag team on that one. And he just has a really nice eye for weird designs. And this one is about as weird as it gets. So this is a turn-based strategy game where you can move really fucking fast. Like, you can move all the way across the screen if you have a straight line to it. However, the enemies will catch up to you if you take too long. And it makes it this really interesting back and forth puzzle of trying to zip around, trying to make it so that you pass by someone to absolutely slice their throat open. And it's even got some nice little extra effects on the side as well. Like if there's a guy standing next to the guy that you just killed and the blood splatter hits him, he goes blind for a turn. There's enemies that can block you. There's a couple of other neat little things like a pikeman trap and a few other things that I won't spoil on top of that. But the game's just got this really intense pace, which is weird considering that it's a turn-based game where you have to try and figure out the optimal way to get across the arena. And you've got like a ton of options in order to actually do it because there's a lot of room, but you've also got a very limited lifespan. You've only got a lifespan of 250 turns. However, there is also a neat little feature in that you can see where the opponent is going to end up simply by using the crank. And even coming into a room on a different tile can completely change up the way that you go about the puzzle. It just makes this really interesting and replayable game, not to mention that you can actually like go down different paths and even turn around and head back the other way if you find yourself cornered in a room that you otherwise wouldn't be. It's a really clever idea, it's extremely well implemented, and it's also got the best presentation of the fortnight by far. Because seriously, just look at it. It doesn't have any music, but it has a really good set of sound effects, and just this isometric artwork just instantly sells the theme. It is absolutely the best game of the fortnight, and I want to play more of it. A lot more of it. So that's it for this bi-weekly playdate. However, due to technical issues, this may or may not be the last one, and it's entirely out of my control because my playdate was playing up massively over the last couple of days. I'm surprised I managed to get this footage recorded as well as I did, but I wouldn't install games, and some games that previously didn't have crashing problems started to crash a lot. So I ended up trying to do a few reboots. That didn't help. I took everything off the internal memory and back on. That didn't help either. And so I ended up doing a factory reset. However, I didn't realize the factory reset would actually reset all of the where I was in the season. So it actually reset me back to the first week of games. And that means I'll have to wait over a month and a half to get back to where I was in order to actually start doing these videos again. So that may actually mean the end of this series if the Playdate support doesn't get back to me. That's kind of stupid, if I'm being honest with you. Like, what the hell? Why did factory resetting cause me to lose my progress? That should be something that should be tracked on the account side, not on the individual Playdate side, but whatever. I guess I'll have to deal with it. I have sent off a support email saying, hey, what's the deal? Can you help me out with this? But if they can't, well, if I can't figure something else out, this may well be the end of the series. I apologize for this if you've been enjoying it, but with that said, this has been Blue Maxima. Hopefully I'll see you next fortnight.